During the 1970s, before I was born, my dad worked as a trail guide in California. He'd lead groups of tourists on horseback across mountain trails and such, and he met a lot of people during his time there. He met this Native American guy, who started out as a regular customer and eventually became an employee. He came from an Indian reservation, although he never said which. He also didn't explain why he left. But he was a cool guy, so my dad never really gave his origins much thought. He always figured that he left for personal reasons and didn't want to be bothered about it, so my dad never brought it up. One day, my dad, his brother, and his Native American friend were out on the trail with a group of people. It was a pretty ordinary day. My dad and uncle told jokes back and forth, their friend laughing and cheering, and the tourists took pictures with their bulky cameras. Nothing unusual. As they were moving along, somebody shouted, "Coyote!" and pointed into a little valley on the left side of the field. Again, nothing strange. This was in the grassy chaparral of Central California, and coyotes are a very common sight. My dad and his companions stopped their horses so that their guests could have a look at the creature. My dad and his friend got to chatting, but my uncle kept staring at the coyote, with his features all scrunched up, like he was trying to get a better look. My dad asked him what was up, and he said, "This coyote? It doesn't look healthy." The coyote had very long and thin legs, and it didn't walk normally. Most dogs walk by lifting a front leg and then lifting the opposite back leg, but this coyote walked by lifting both legs on one side of its body, sort of like a camel. Its snout was also a good 3 inches longer than normal, and it held its nose high into the air, as if it was sniffing for something. My dad said that it was probably just deformed, and my uncle agreed. Their friend, however, was silent. He was slightly shivering and staring directly at the weird coyote. My dad put his hand on his shoulder and asked, "What's wrong?" With a shaking finger, his friend pointed at the coyote and said, "The tail. Look at the tail." My dad looked and said, "What do you mean, it has no tail?" The friend said that he'd explain everything when they got back to base camp, so my dad led the guests down the trail. The coyote followed them. It didn't come up from the valley, but it followed the group. The tourists thought it was fun to have a little companion, but my dad's friend never looked at it. He was silent the whole way back. When they were just a couple hundred yards from the base camp, the coyote leaped out of the underbrush, about 20 feet in front of my dad and his companions, freaking the hell out of them and the horses. The coyote stared directly at my dad's friend and smiled. Not a panting smile, like most dogs do, but a full-on, teeth-bared smile, which showed off its yellow, brown-stained teeth. The friend stared back and produced a small piece of wood, with an arrow burned into it. He showed its face to the coyote, which looked away. Then, the creature howled. Coyote howls are usually high-pitched, but this one was very low-pitched, almost baritone. It sounded like the thing had fluid in its lungs, as if it was drowning and able to make one final scream. Then it ran back into the bushes. My uncle, ever the jokester, turned to the stunned tourists and said, "Well, I hope you guys got your money's worth." At camp, my dad's friend wouldn't give them the whole story, only vague statements like, "It killed them, and now it's going to try and kill me." He said that he did this to protect my dad and uncle because the less you know about it, the better. He gave them each a small piece of wood with an arrow on it, saying that it would protect them from the thing. He made them himself, he said, and he was glad that he got to test them out. He drove out at 8 o'clock, and my dad never saw him again. My father always used to tell this story when I was younger, especially during camping trips. He's a high-spirited kind of guy, so he always tells it in good spirits. But sometimes he says that on cold nights, when the wind is blowing and there's a rustling in the trees, he can hear the low howl of the thing that wasn't a coyote. Let me start off by saying that my wife doesn't believe in paranormal entities or anything of that nature. We have 3 cats, and one of them likes to be a rebel, jumping onto counters and meowing at the top of his lungs just looking for attention. He does this throughout the night, and it's a regular occurrence. Last night, After a few beers and video games, I decided it was time to head to bed with my wife. When I woke up this morning, my wife was basically attached to me with wide eyes and a nervous look on her face. I asked her what was wrong, and she proceeded to tell me what happened last night. She said that around 2:50 in the morning, she was woken up to a noise that sounded like one of our cats downstairs meowing unusually loud. After giving herself a few seconds to wake up and fully pay attention, she said that the meows sounded more like a person trying to mimic a cat, and it kept saying hello. After meowing for 2 to 3 minutes, a loud bang came at our door, and then a notification went off for a motion sensor at our front door. When she told me this, I checked my phone, and sure enough, there was a notification for motion detected at 2:52 a.m. I asked her why she didn't wake me up so I could grab my gun. She said she was frozen with fear and didn't want it to hear her make a noise. Something made me uncomfortable about her story. Last night I set the home's security alarm around 9 p.m., and we didn't turn it off till we walked the dog this morning. To make things worse, we had slept with all of the animals in the room and the door was closed. So whatever was in our house or outside the front door was not one of our animals. Obviously, the first thing that came to my mind was a skinwalker, but maybe I'm just being paranoid. I checked all the rooms in the house after I got up. I'm not sure what I could have done anyways. It's very odd that my wife was scared so badly by something she doesn't necessarily believe in. We bought this house brand new, so no one has lived here before. When I'm home alone, I do feel like I'm being watched or someone's always walking directly behind me. My wife also said that the house has given her chills since we moved in. Something is just off about it. We got home later and I went to hang up one of my shirts in the master bedroom closet when I noticed that the board that covers the attic access has been shifted a little. When I asked my wife about it, she said she's never been up there and the builders would have placed it back in its original place before we made the purchase. I'm genuinely getting anxious just thinking about what could be going on. The other day, I stayed up all night because I couldn't sleep. I'm mentioning this because I've read research and studies that say strange things can happen when you don't sleep. You can hallucinate, so I'm not sure if I should believe what I witnessed or not. However, I don't really believe in skinwalkers, demons, or anything like that, and I still don't. But after what happened yesterday, I am still creeped out. I live in a rural area, with forests all around us. Yes, there are some roads, but outside my porch, there's a hill that goes up pretty far. My parents have cows that usually roam up there. Now, I was very tired and trying to stay awake, and I thought it would be a good idea to bathe in the sun to wake me up a bit, which it kinda did. I was completely alone because my dad and sister were hunting in a cabin a few miles away, and my mom and sister were out going to the store. At this point, I opened the door and stepped up to the little pond area. We have a small pond with steps and a nice little flat wooden area where you can stand. I stood there for a bit, but then I started to get tired. I lay down on the wood. It sounds stupid by itself, but hey, I was tired. I took a little nap, but I kept hearing crunching. Like I said before, I don't believe in skinwalkers or any of that other stuff, so I didn't think anything of it. I eventually got up and got curious and looked back up there beyond the fence. I heard another huge crunch, then a gasp, not a yawn or any noise animals would make, but a human gasp. My heart dropped, and I was frozen in fear. I saw the outlines of what looked like a human standing on all fours, just some trees away, almost hiding, staring at me. That fight or flight response you do when you're scared, well, I kind of freeze up instead. I was frozen in fear. It couldn't have been, I thought to myself. I was supposed to be alone. None of our cows were in that area either. I don't know what the hell it was. After the shock of fear, I ran down the steps and opened the door as fast as I could. I was looking behind me as I did this. When I opened the door, I kept looking outside where I heard it. There were vines and tree leaves where I heard it, so if it was there I couldn't see it. I'm still scared to this current moment. I'm not going to tell my parents because they made fun of my sister, who said she thought she saw a skinwalker. But man, I don't know, but I'm kind of scared. Again, I hadn't slept the night before, so maybe it was a hallucination, but if it wasn't, then God help me. I'm not going out there, and if I have to, I'll make it quick,